So as I mentioned, FDA has been engaged in implementing these new sections of the law since enactment. And this is both with respect to the 503As and the 503Bs. They've done some guidances. They've done some proposed rulemakings. They've solicited input on drugs that are demonstrably difficult to compound, on those products that should appear on the lists of APIs that are available for both 503Bs and 503As to use. We still await kind of final action on most of these. The agency has issued a final guidance on basically what it expects with respect to 503A compounding, and therein is fairly clear about its expectation that the 503A pharmacies are not engaged in compounding for office stock. In other words, they must receive prescriptions before they can part with the drugs that they compound, even if they compound them in the anticipatory way that they're allowed to. Recent enforcement actions. FDA has sent several warning letters since the enactment of the DQSA in 2013. Most have been targeted to 503A facilities, which is not surprising because that's where most of the action is right now. A lot of the 503Bs are just kind of getting up and coming into compliance with the laws that the agency has actually still not fully effectuated. Interestingly, the emphasis in those warning letters from the FDA is on the contaminated products and those with kind of health issues. So not surprisingly, the agency is saying we are going to devote our limited enforcement resources at this point to deal with those pharmacies that we think are engaging in conduct that poses the greatest risk to the public health. And what they've been doing is basically citing GMP violations, and the few warning letters that have gone to 503Bs have basically accused them of not meeting their obligations to comply according to GMP. But they have focused on uses of bulk substances that are not authorized under 503A. They have focused on the 503A's failure to tie their prescriptions to the compounded drugs in the way that I just mentioned. But there's a really important concept here that I want to talk about, and it's this notion of insanitary conditions. As I said, 503As are exempted from GMP. And it turns out that GMP is just one of many ways that the agency can assert a product is what they call adulterated under the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. And so what the agency has done, which is very clever, which they did not do when they were enforcing the first round of 503A, is to inspect pharmacies and say, look, it is true that you are not required to meet GMP, and we cannot enforce that standard against you. But we can enforce a GMP-like standard, which is if you are manufacturing your products under insanitary conditions whereby they may be contaminated with filth, those are grounds to assert those products are illegal. And so the agency has essentially been going to places where it sees the compounding falls so far short of meeting GMP, which again it can't enforce, that it's actually occurring in an insanitary environment, and it has taken action. And appropriately so, because the idea here is that they're trying to avoid a situation in which sterile injectable drugs become contaminated. They're trying to avoid another NECC type situation. The agency has not been as active in enforcing the commercial copy language as it had pre-Western states. And so, as I said, both 503A and 503B contain these provisions that make it very clear that pharmacies are not to go out and compound drugs that are FDA approved and commercially available. The agency has been less aggressive in sending those letters since 2013 than it had in the years just following the initial enactment of 503A. My own view is that they are going to, through guidance and rulemaking, clarify exactly what their expectations are around what it means to compound these commercial copies in inordinate amounts, et cetera, to really lock down what the expectations are, and that we'll then see in the next 9 to 12 months more enforcement in that area.